welcome to B&E on D&D. This is my lovely wife, Brittany, and I'm Eric. Thank you. And this is Hawk. So today we're responding to a comment on Facebook, and one of the first questions was, what is the goal of Dungeons and Dragons? And the basic goal is to have fun. So part of that fun is talking to your friends and asking, what kind of fun, what would it look like?
What kind of game do you want to play?
Game
What
do
are
you
your
wanna play?
goals?
Yeah.
D&D, unlike most games, does not have a set game winning condition. It's sort of when it either naturally a tale comes to an end, or when people just no longer can get together to game anymore. So what you are doing in D&D is that there is a game master or a dungeon master and a group of players, and together you are weaving together a story.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main thing. So the goal is to have fun while having this story. And then when you've won, kind of depends on the immediate group. It could be when a campaign ends. So maybe you have purchased something that has a set story already, and you're going through it. And then when the end of that tale is reached, you're done. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's when you kill the evil dragon overlord that is oppressing a town. Or maybe it's when you reach level 20. Or... Again,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's when just nobody schedules a match anymore and you just can't meet up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Or you get an itch to play a new character concept.
Oh, that happens a lot.
Yeah. So it would happen to me in my old games because I would die a lot, so I was kind of forced.
Yeah, the way people handle death, resurrection varies massively from individual game to game. Some people are very into, well, you just are resurrected. Or maybe they have to go through something more difficult. So that it really does vary on your players and the game master.
So part of that is you're going to need the books, the core books, as they're called. And you want to be careful because none of, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, none of them explicitly say...
On the outside.
On the outside will say that you need all 3 books. They may imply it, but you're going to need a player's handbook for the players that'll be playing. And then one of you will be a dungeon master, and the dungeon master will need the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual.
Which is basically a guide on how to DM, how to run a game, and then the Monster Manual is all those stats, how to play the monsters that people come across.
Yeah.
And different versions of role-playing games will have different books and different necessities. Mm-hmm. You also need dice.
So
that's a D20, a D12, a D10, a D8, a D6, and a D4. And Eric always wants a percentile die.
I like
you
percentile.
You can totally roll a D10 twice. One for the 10 would be 100%, 9 would be 90, and then you roll it again for the 1, 2, 3. So like 91%. You'd be rolling a 9 and then a 1. But, yeah.
Okay, and then optional but fun would be miniatures.
Oh, right. Yes. So, sometimes it's easier to visualize what's going on in this tale in your head if you have a little bit of a visual aid. So you have what's called a battle mat, and then you would usually draw on or have miniatures you can purchase that would sort of build where you're fighting. Here's the monster here, players are here. This is also helpful if you have a player who's a little creative on where they are at different points in the battle. Maybe at one point they are within 10 feet, and then suddenly maybe they're 30 feet away. And then they think they're within melee range again, so 5 feet, and then they run. So having everything on a miniature is easier to keep track of where things are, whether or not you're meaning to cheat.
So the other thing was, what are the powers?
Unless you're really, really good at theater of the mind and you can actually keep it all in your head, in which case, if that's your style, more power to you.
Certainly more affordable.
Yeah.
And so the next thing was, what are the powers? And that's a very long topic because it's part of the game is that it's got so much.
And it depends on your race and your class and your skills and your feats. So those are all 4 things that are fairly in-depth topics in and of themselves.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of just go over the races and what they do. So the very first race that's listed is the dwarf, and that's been one of the races since the beginning.
And your favorite.
And it's my favorite race. I love playing dwarves. You don't have to go by the cliche or stereotype of any of these races, what you see in movie or books. You just have your own personality and just happen to say, well, I'm a dwarf. It's all okay. It's how you want to have fun. But the main thing with dwarves is they're about 5 feet or so. They can live a few hundred years. They're stout, very hardy. Constitution is their main stat they get a boost on. And
dark vision.
Dark vision helps them see in the darkness, which helps when you're dungeon delving.
Well, you can see in dim light.
Or dim light, yeah.
Up to 60 feet. So it's not pitch black and you can see everything. It's like a single candle, I think, amount of light, I think is the rule of thumb.
Single candle
60
light.
feet around a single candle you can see clearly. So, yeah.
And they're minors, so they're good with
that again varies on how you want to play, because obviously a colony of dwarves could not all be minors.
No, well,
I mean, that would not work. You can't have a community that all only have one profession.
Right, yes.
So, yeah.
So then there's the elf.
Then there's the elf. So their main stat is called dexterity, and that they're just a little bit faster, a little bit more nimble. They also live a long time.
They also have dark vision, which is nice.
Dark vision. And they're very good at perception, so they're very aware of things around them. They notice things.
Then there's the halfling, and that's not to be confused with the hobbit folk of Tolkien's
world. No, they are not of Middle Earth. Hobbits are basically all about their comforts and their meals and good tilled earth, and halflings are just a race of folk who tend to be very dexterous, and they're lucky, and they've got some resistance. But they can move through spaces of a creature one size larger. So I always visualize ducking between legs, ducking around legs. Sort of, I think of it as when I was a kid in a crowd in a big department store. You can just weave and bob, and you can get miles ahead of your parents.
Next is the human, and the human is kind of like the catch-all, especially for beginners. It's certainly one of the easiest races to get into because we're
humans. Right, so it's easier to imagine you're a human.
And they're kind of a jack of all trades, so they get little minor boosts to stats and whatnot, and you can
all of your abilities go up by 1.
Yeah.
So we'll go into abilities later.
But there's no dark vision.
Right. Yes. We don't have dark vision.
No. So then there's Dragonborn. And with the Dragonborn, you're essentially a bipedal dragon-looking creature.
About a foot or 2 taller than humans.
So you get to pick what color or metal that your dragon blood is. So that's gold or silver for metallics,
or
bronze or copper, or the color, which could be red, green, black, red.
In general, their chromatics, so the colors, are generally evil, and the metallics are generally good. Generally. So you can totally play a good black Dragonborn.
Or a totally evil gold
Right.
Dragonborn.
Right.
And then they got a breath weapon.
Yes, and that depends on what color or metallic color you choose. So it can be acid or fire or cold. Another thing about Dragonborns is that they have a boost to their charisma and to their strength.
Next is Gnome. So they're the smallest of the player character
About
races.
3 or 4 feet.
And depending, there's with a lot of these races, there are different variations within that.
Right. So there's like dark elves, or there's hill dwarves, or we're not going into those.
No, we're not going into those now.
Lots of variants, and it also depends on what you're playing and what your dungeon master, game master is allowing in their game.
But gnomes have dark vision.
Mm-hmm.
And then next is the half elf.
They also, gnomes have a bonus to their intelligence, and they have some resistance against some charm magics.
They'd be a great mage. So half elf, they got a human and an elf ancestry. So their cultures blend the two, but they're not quite fully accepted in either. So they're great diplomats.
They've got the increased charisma from the elf heritage, and then they have 2 others you can pick, your abilities, that would be up by 1, and that's from their human parentage. Mm-hmm. They do get the dark vision from their elf side, and they have saving throws against charms, so magic's a little bit harder to hit them. And they're proficient in at least 2 skills. Again, we'll go over skills later, and that's from their human side. Mm-hmm. So they're very much a blend.
And then next is the half orc. So they've got an orc and a human ancestry. Mm-hmm. And so the main thing with them is they've got all sorts of fun abilities. One where normally you have hit points, and if you're at 0, you're considered to be dying. Unconscious. But they can jump back up at 1 hit point.
Mm-hmm, which is basically you get shoved and you're practically down again. Yeah. But at least you're up.
Yep.
And then also they have dark vision. They are stronger, and their constitution is higher. They also have what's called savage attack. So if they roll real well, called critical on an attack, they can do a bit more damage. And they also have menacing, which means that they are proficient in the intimidation skill, which is cool. But we'll go into those later, more details.
And then there's Tiefling, where
Tieflings are so cool.
Tiefling or Tiefling, you've got fiendish blood in the background. So you got dark vision, you got resistance to fire, and there's a physical characteristic like horns.
Or maybe a tail.
Or a tail.
Maybe your skin color's different. Your intelligence is higher, and your charisma goes up. And you also get extra spells. And remember, charisma does not necessarily mean you're really good at making friends. Charisma can also be used to intimidate. So it's kind of working people.
Mm-hmm. So that's the show. Thank you for coming. Please don't forget to share, like, subscribe. Definitely leave a comment. We love to read those for topic ideas. See you next time.
Happy
Bye-bye.
gaming.